The night I came home from a date with someone I'd been seeing for 3 weeks, I expected Margot. Not Margot from the list, a different one, someone new. I stopped myself. Let me start over. The night I came home from a date with Simone, not Simone from the list either. Okay, I need to read the file properly first. The night I came home from a date with a woman I'd been seeing for 3 weeks, I didn't think much about the look on Abby's face when I walked through the door. I noticed it, the way you notice a car slowing down on your street, instinctively, briefly, and then you let it go. She was on the couch with her laptop and a half-eaten bowl of cereal, which meant she'd worked through dinner again. I dropped my keys on the hook by the door and said something like, "Still alive," because that's the kind of thing we said to each other. Not hello, not how was it. Just that. She said, obviously, without looking up. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water and stood there longer than I needed to, staring at nothing. The date had been fine. The woman I'd been seeing, her name was Danny, short for Daniela. She was smart and she laughed easily and she had opinions about things, which I liked. She was the kind of person who made a dinner reservation feel like an event. But I'd driven home thinking about Abby, not in a dramatic way, not in a way I was ready to examine. I just thought, I wonder if she ate. And then I pulled into the parking garage underneath our building and sat in the car for 2 minutes longer than necessary. That was the first thing I didn't say out loud. We'd been roommates for 14 months. I'd found the listing on a Facebook group for young professionals in Ottawa. 2-bedroom, hardwood floors, close enough to the Redo Center that you could walk in 20 minutes if the weather wasn't trying to kill you. Abby had posted it. Her previous roommate had moved to Vancouver for work, and she needed someone by the first of the month. I needed somewhere to be. We met at a coffee shop on Elgin Street to do the polite version of an interview, the kind where you're pretending you're not interviewing each other. She showed up 6 minutes late and apologized like it had been 6 hours. She was wearing a coat that was too big for her and carrying a tote bag with a library logo on it, and she ordered a black coffee and drank half of it before either of us said anything useful. I liked her immediately, the way you like someone who doesn't perform being likable. She asked me 3 questions. Did I cook? Did I have noise complaints from previous landlords? And did I have a problem with plants? I said I cooked occasionally. No, and only if there were too many of them. She had 11 plants. She showed me a picture. I said that seemed manageable. She said she was working on a 12th. I moved in 11 days later. The thing about living with Abby was that it never felt like an arrangement. That's the word I kept coming back to when people asked how I ended up with a female roommate. Arrangement. Like it was a workaround, a compromise. It wasn't. It felt more like something that had been decided before either of us knew we were deciding it. She worked in public policy for the federal government, something to do with housing strategy. She kept odd hours, came home with the kind of tired that lives behind your eyes, and had a habit of leaving her work shoes by the front door, in a way that told me exactly what kind of day she'd had. Shoes kicked off haphazardly. Rough day. Shoes placed neatly side by side. She'd found something to hold on to. I worked for a mid-size engineering firm doing infrastructure projects. Bridges, mostly. The kind of work that felt meaningful in the abstract and tedious in the specific, which I think describes most worthwhile things. We fell into a rhythm without trying to. She made coffee in the mornings, always too much, always left half a pot for me, even though she was usually gone by the time I woke up. I took out the recycling without being asked. She kept the bathroom clean. I vacuumed. We split groceries loosely and didn't track it, because tracking it felt like the kind of thing that would ruin what we had. What we had was easy. That's the simplest way to say it. Being around Abby was easy in the way that good weather is easy. You don't think about it until it's gone. I started seeing Danny in February. She was a friend of a colleague, met her at a birthday thing at a bar on Bank Street, and she was funny and present and completely uncomplicated in the way that I hadn't felt in a long time. We went for dinner twice, and it was good. She texted consistently. She made plans. I told Abby about it on a Tuesday, the kind of gray February Tuesday that Ottawa specializes in, where the sky is the color of old concrete and the wind has a personal grudge against you. She was making pasta when I came home and she asked how my day was, and I said it was fine. And then I said, almost as an afterthought, I've been seeing someone. She stirred the pot without turning around. Yeah, her name's Danny, We've been out a couple times. Is she nice? She's good, I said. Yeah, she's good. Abby turned around then. She had a wooden spoon in her hand and a look on her face I couldn't quite read, like she was doing a math problem she hadn't expected. Good like actually good, or good like you don't know what to say yet? Somewhere in the middle. She nodded like that was a complete answer and turned back to the stove. Pasta's almost ready. You eating? I ate. We talked about other things, and I filed that look away somewhere I didn't look at often. 3 weeks later was the night I came home from dinner with Danny and found Abby on the couch. How was it? She said, this time looking up. Good, I said, and I heard how thin the word sounded. It was good. What's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with it. She closed her laptop. Not all the way, just most of the way, the screen going dim. She looked at me with that particular patience she had, the kind that didn't ask questions so much as leave space for them. It was a perfectly nice evening, I said. I stopped. You just what? I don't know. I sat down on the other end of the couch, not close to her, but not far. I kept feeling like I was supposed to be somewhere else. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, do you want to see her again? I think so. Maybe. I don't know. That's a lot of not knowing for someone who just had a perfectly nice evening. I'm aware, I said. She picked up her mug from the coffee table and held it with both hands, looking at nothing in particular. I noticed she'd changed out of her work clothes into an oversized university sweatshirt that I knew she'd had since her undergrad. There was something about the ordinariness of it that did something to me I didn't want to think about. I'm going to bed, I said, and stood up. Okay. I made it to the hallway before she spoke again. For what it's worth, she said, if you kept feeling like you're supposed to be somewhere else, maybe you were. I didn't turn around. Maybe. I saw Danny one more time, a week later. We went for coffee instead of dinner, which told us both something without either of us naming it. She was perceptive in the way smart people tend to be. She knew before I did that I was somewhere else, and she was kind enough not to make me explain where. I had a good time, she said, when we were standing outside on the sidewalk. I did too, I said, and I meant it. You don't have to, she said. It's okay. She hugged me briefly, the way you hug someone goodbye at an airport. And then she walked to her car, and I stood on the sidewalk in the cold for a moment, feeling the specific ache of something that could have been something and wasn't. I drove home thinking about the last time I'd felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It was a Saturday in October, 4 months earlier. Abby and I had driven out to a farmer's market in Almonte. Her idea. I'd complained the whole way there. And we'd spent 2 hours walking in the cold looking at preserves and bread in ceramic mugs, and I'd bought a jar of apple butter I hadn't needed. And at some point she'd grabbed my arm to show me something, and she hadn't let go right away, and I'd thought, very clearly, this is fine. Everything is fine. I was still thinking about that when I got home. The next month was the part of the story I don't love telling because it doesn't make me look particularly thoughtful or brave. I knew something by then. I knew it the way you know you've left the stove on. That low, insistent certainty that you keep walking away from anyway. I didn't say anything. I made excuses to be home in the evenings. I noticed when she was tired and I made tea without asking. I stopped mentioning Danny. I had a long conversation with my friend Benji at a bar on a Thursday where I said nothing directly, but apparently said enough because he looked at me over his pint and said, "You're describing your roommate." I know, I said. And nothing. That's stupid, he said with the efficiency of someone who has run out of patience for this exact kind of conversation. I told him he didn't understand. He told me I was right. He didn't understand because from the outside it was very simple. And then we talked about hockey until it wasn't Thursday anymore. The thing broke open on a Wednesday in April, not dramatically, not with raised voices or a slammed door. The way things actually break open, which is quietly and with very little warning. Abby had taken a day off work, which she almost never did. I knew because her shoes were inside the door when I got home at 6, placed neatly side by side, which meant she hadn't gone out. I found her at the kitchen table with her laptop, but she wasn't working. She was just staring at it, and the screen was black and she'd been crying. Not recently. The kind of recently that was 2 hours ago but left traces. "Hey," I said. She looked up. "Hey, what happened?" She shook her head. Not like nothing happened, like she didn't know where to start. I sat down across from her. The kitchen was quiet. That specific quiet of a Wednesday afternoon in a building where most people work, where the sound of the street below feels very far away. I waited. "I passed bats over for a promotion," she said finally. "It went to someone I trained. And I know it's not the end of the world. I know I'm fine. She stopped. I had a really clear idea of where I was supposed to be by now, and I'm not there. "I know," I said. "I'm not looking for anything," she said. "I just needed to say it out loud to someone." "I know. Say whatever you need to say." She looked at me. "How do you always know when to just listen?" I didn't answer that. She told me about the meeting, about the thing her manager had said. That was technically a compliment and felt like a dismissal. About the colleague who got the title and the salary adjustment and the office with a window. She talked for a long time, and I didn't say much, and at some point I made us both something to eat. Eggs. Because it was almost 7, and neither of us had eaten, and eggs are the kind of thing you can make without thinking. She ate most of it, which meant she was feeling slightly better. And then she looked at me and said, "I keep waiting for my actual life to start, and then I remember this is it. Is that bad? I don't know. It used to feel like waiting. Lately it feels more like." She paused. "Lately it feels more okay. Most of the time." "What changed?" She picked up her fork, then put it down again. "I'm not sure I want to say." Something shifted in the room, not dramatically. The temperature didn't change. But I felt it, the way you feel a current under cold water. Not visible, not loud, just there. "Okay," I said. She looked at me for a moment. "Are you still seeing Danny?" "No, that ended. A while ago." "Oh." She looked at her plate. "I didn't know. I didn't really announce it. How come?" I said, "Same reason you're not sure you want to say what changed." The silence that followed was the kind that doesn't feel like silence. It feels like every sentence that's been left out of a conversation for 14 months, arriving all at once and taking up all the space in the room. Abby looked up. "I keep telling myself it's not a good idea," she said. "I know. We live together. It could ruin everything." "I know. I've thought about it a lot. I know." "Stop saying I know," she said. "It's making this very hard." "Sorry." She pushed her plate to the side. "I don't want to be someone you end up with by accident. I don't want to be the default option because you live here, and it's easy. That's not what this is." "How do you know?" I thought about October. I thought about the farmer's market and the jar of apple butter and the way she'd grabbed my arm without thinking. I thought about the Tuesday in February when she turned around from the stove with that look on her face I couldn't read. I thought about the night I came home from dinner with Danny, feeling like I was supposed to be somewhere else, and drove home without deciding to and found her on the couch. "Because easy would have been easier than this," I said. "This has been the least easy year I've had in a long time, and I chose it every day." She was quiet for a moment. "You should have said something. So should you." I was scared. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." She got up and brought her plate to the sink and stood there with her back to me for a moment, and I stayed where I was, at the table, in the kitchen that had become the most familiar place I'd ever lived in. I didn't try to fill the silence. There was something almost careful about waiting for her to be ready, the same way you don't rush a door that's opening on its own. She turned around. "The thing I wasn't sure I wanted to say," she said, "is that lately this apartment, this routine, coming home, feels more like my life than anything else has. And I think it's because of you." I looked at her. "Abby, don't make it weird," she said, and her voice wavered slightly on the last word. "I'm not making it weird." I stood up. "I'm just going to say that I have been paying attention to you for 14 months in a way that had nothing to do with being roommates, and I don't think I'm ready to stop." She looked at me for a long moment. "Okay," she said. It was barely a word. It was everything. The first time we kissed it was still April, and the window above the sink was open because the weather had finally, grudgingly, started to come around. She'd been making the coffee she always made too much of, and I'd been standing in the kitchen the way I always did in the mornings. And she turned around to hand me a mug, and I didn't take it right away. She held it between us for a moment. "You're staring," she said. "I know. Still making everything hard, I see, ah." "It's a habit," I said. She set the mug on the counter. And then it wasn't a conversation anymore. People ask, when they find out how it happened, whether we talked about the risk. Whether we'd sat down and discussed what it would mean if it didn't work. What about the apartment? What about the lease? What about everything we'd built that could fall apart? We didn't have that conversation. Not because we were naive, though maybe we were, a little, but because by the time we got there, the calculus had already shifted. The risk of saying something had stopped feeling bigger than the risk of not saying it. That happens, I think. At some point, the thing you're protecting, by staying quiet, stops being worth protecting. The apple butter, for the record, is still in the cupboard above the fridge. It's almost gone. Abby found it a few weeks after the kitchen conversation and made a face at me like I'd hidden evidence. "You bought apple butter at that market in Almonte," she said. "You hate fruit preserves." "I don't hate them. You called them old people food." I said they reminded me of old people food. There's nuance there. She looked at the jar and then at me and then back at the jar with the expression she gets when she's deciding whether something is funny. "Why did you buy it?" "I don't know," I said. "It seemed like the right thing to do at the time." She put the jar back in the cupboard and didn't say anything else, but she was smiling when she walked away. Some things you only understand looking backwards. The apple butter, the too much coffee, the shoes by the door. All of it was telling me something I wasn't listening to yet. I think that's okay. I think sometimes you need the full distance of 14 months before you can see what was always there. I got home from work last Tuesday, and she was on the couch again, laptop open, bowl of cereal, the light in the apartment doing that warm thing it does in the early evening when the sun is hitting the window just right. She looked up when I came in, not like she hadn't been waiting, like she had been, and she didn't see any reason to pretend otherwise. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she said. And that was enough. That has always been enough.